Hey everyone, good morning, good evening. I'm Nishagni, and this is Nishagni Tarot, where you receive inspired insights to create an empowered life. So, all the things that are happening in the world, all the humanitarian crises that are happening in the world are having, I've been having so many thoughts that the past few days and yesterday, and it's just been so hard to watch the world suffer. And so today I wanted to draw a card to figure out what's going on, what message the universe wants me to know. And so I pulled a tarot card and an oracle card, and so I wanted to share this with you because it's something that today something quite amazing happened, because the universe gave me a really new perspective about life and a new kind of message that I really wanted to share with all of you. So this is going to be a slightly longer video. So once you see the cards, feel free to just listen to this video like a podcast, if you will. So the tarot card that I picked today was the Tower, and as you know, the Tower talks of sudden changes, especially destruction, and when things just seem to be completely, gone crazy, gone wild, where we can't do anything to save ourselves or other people. And it's a really and for a lot of times, I know people say, especially in the spiritual world, that the tower isn't really that bad. It's all about positive transformation. So don't be afraid of it. Just embrace the tower energy. But today it feels like the tower really talks of the end of destruction, of humanitarian crises from different areas in the world, and just a lot of anguish and horror and torture. And I wanted to know, okay, yes, the universe also acknowledges that things are really, just really shitty at the moment. And so what can we do in order to manage these crises that are going on, to manage this tower moment and take it towards the star moment, to the star, to the moon, and to the sun? Because obviously we want to move towards the sun, right? That's a great place to be. And when I pulled the oracle card for that, I received this one: I honor my body. So, when I first saw this card, the very first thing that came to me was about the physical body. Because, for example, let's take the manuka flower that the card mentions. So, the affirmation on the card is, I honor my body. The manuka flower entrusts me to care for myself. I live and believe in her reminder of self care. So the manuka flower, based on my research, is a flower that has a lot of antibacterial properties, antiviral properties. It can help in cellular regeneration, tissue regeneration, and essentially, help sort of heal wounds, heal burn marks, and heal ulcers. And essentially, it's like the perfect soothing herb or a plant which you can use to heal yourself. And so initially, when I saw this card and I did my research, I thought, okay, I honor my body refers to the physical body. And in the case of how we can move from this tower moment, wherein there are so many people, whether it's in Afghanistan, Palestine, Haiti, or any other place in the world, how can we help them get out of this tower position or tower stage of their life? And I received this card. I thought it was in the form of physical aid for the body, like, for example, donation of clothes, donation of medicine, donation of food, donation of books, giving them shelter, giving them refuge when they came as refugees to our nations. It was all about healing the body, honoring the body, and helping them protect their physical bodies, essentially protecting their lives. So I wanted this message to just sink in, and I wanted to figure out how I can contribute to these efforts and how I can help people, displaced people, and people who have been hunted by militant organizations. How can I help them honor their bodies? How can I help them preserve their bodies, preserve their life? And so I just set my cards aside and I just went out for a run. And usually when I run, I listen to podcasts. And today I just happened to come across this podcast called the Hippie Witch podcast. And I've never heard of this podcast before, right? And this is the very first time that I've heard of this podcast. So I open it up and I just randomly like scroll through and I just press on something. I didn't even see the topic. And the creator of this podcast is talking about how the guest of the day is Laura Tempest Zakroff, the author of View the Liminal and Anatomy of a Witch. And how the topic today was going to be about um, discussing about how the human body, and the spiritual properties of the human body, and how we can use spirituality and magic to heal the human body, right? And before Laura came onto the podcast, the creator of the podcast started talking about a book that they had read entitled "The Body is the Subconscious Mind." Okay, so the body is the subconscious mind. So I was really intrigued by this and I was like, okay, I need to Google what this is. And so when I came back home, I did some research and I found out that this book, The Body is the Subconscious Mind, actually is written by a doctor called Dr. Candace Pert. So Dr. Candace Pert was a neuroscientist. So she recently passed away, I think a couple of years ago. And Dr. Candace Pert was a neuroscientist, and she has been, or the Dr. Pert has been credited for discovering opiate receptors. So in 1972, Dr. Pert discovered opiate receptors, which until then people or medical professionals did not know existed. Now, essentially, receptors are like these physiological features which facilitate the transmission of messages in the human body. So for example, if the brain or if any tissue or any organ in the body wants to communicate with another tissue or organ in the body, the receptors the receptors in the body are the ones which facilitate the transmission of these messages. They act like messengers, and the actual messengers they employ are what we call as peptides. So peptides are short chain amino acids, which essentially act like messengers. Like I said, they're like the postmen who carry the messages from one tissue to another tissue. So the peptides essentially travel through the blood. So when Candace Pert discovered opiate receptors, Dr. Pert also found that these receptors had opioid peptides. So now opioid peptides are really special, and that's because they manage a variety of physiological things, which has changed the definition of science and health forever. So opioid peptides do everything, such as they help manage pain or modulate pain when someone has been hurt. They manage our body's tendency to get addicted to something. So if you usually see a person who has a serious addiction, the opioid peptides are the one that are typically involved in that addiction in some way. Opioid peptides also facilitate or stimulate emotional reactions. So if you have if you feel anger or fear or guilt, or happiness, so it is opioid receptors that facilitate the emotional response. And opioid receptors also support cellular proliferation, wherein how cells divide, how cells heal themselves, how cells uh, you know create, join together to form something new, some new organ or some healed tissue, right? And how those organs function. These opioid receptors and opioid peptides also control things like social bonding. Like for example, if a person is able to bond with someone, or if a person is a loner, all these decisions, all these physiological responses that we do consciously are controlled by the opioid peptides and opioid receptors. And even things like emotional recognition. So for example, let's say you had a blanket which you used as a child, and now 50 years later you find this blanket, and just looking at the blanket or touching the blanket will evoke emotional responses in you, right? So all of this has to do with opioid peptides and opioid receptors. So when uh, Dr. Pert discovered opioid receptors and opioid peptides, uh, Dr. Pert started doing research into how there might be a connect between the physical body and our emotions. Now, for many decades, there's been a lot of research into how the subconscious mind might be the source of our emotional responses. So for example, the reigning theory even today is that our subconscious mind communicates with us through messages, and these messages come out in the form of emotional responses. So when we look at how opioid receptors stimulate emotional responses, the whole premise of Dr. Pert's book, The Body is the Subconscious Mind, talks of how there is this connect between how the body and the subconscious mind are one and the same thing, and how opioid receptors and opioid peptides not only control the body's response but essentially power the subconscious mind. So the subconscious mind is either in charge of the opioid peptides and when or how they're released in the body, or the opioid peptides affect how the subconscious mind work. So I haven't read the book completely. I'm only talking through the reviews that I have read of the book. I want to purchase the book and go through it, but I'm just going by what the reviews I've read. So this is essentially what the book, The Body is the Subconscious Mind, talks of. And a lot of this book tries to bring together the worlds of the physical scientific aspect and the spiritual aspect, because when you think about it, spirituality has been a realm which has been very closely connected to psychology, and especially the work of the subconscious mind. And when we consider how, for example, when we do shadow work, right, we are essentially tapping into the subconscious mind and trying to find a source for those repressed emotions that we have. And essentially what Dr. Pert does in the book, The Body is the Subconscious Mind, is talk of how opioid peptides might somehow be related to the emotions that the subconscious mind produces. And this could explain a lot of how humans not only work physically but also respond emotionally, right? So when I considered all of this information, and it just started to make a lot of sense to me, right? Like, for example, we've all heard of the research where if you take two plant seeds and or two seeds, and then you direct positive energy and positive music and classical music to one, that particular seed grows really well. Whereas a seed, if it has been directed negative energy, it's been given rock music, it doesn't do really well, right? We've heard of these researchers. And we've also there are a lot of indigenous cultures in the world where they believe that if you stand around a tree and then you praise it, you thank it, you show your gratitude, you show your love to the tree, the nature spirit in that tree will be really pleased and that tree will become more bountiful. Whereas if you surround a tree and you scold it and you tell it that you're a horrible tree, you're worthless, you shouldn't be alive, and in many indigenous cultures believe that such a tree would die out slowly because of all the negative energy directed towards it. And even if you think of it from a very subconscious sense for humans too, how a child is raised or how a child grows into being the adult that they are is hugely dependent on what they are told as young children. So if you tell a child good job, and if you encourage the child to be curious, to question social mores and norms, and to sort of not just allow themselves to be bullied, then that child grows up to be a confident, mature, and self-sustained individual. Whereas if you keep telling the child, you're worthless, you're stupid, you're not going to amount to anything, you're essentially killing the child bit by bit, right? And so this all brought back the whole concept of the body is the subconscious mind. And to me, this makes so much sense now that I have this card, I honor my body, because now the whole affirmation or the whole concept has become so much more layered for me, right? So not only should we honor the physical body, we should also honor our mental body. And if I'm talking in terms of how we can help our fellow human beings who are being oppressed, who are being in a very repressed society, then it talks of not just cutting away or healing that gangrenous infection that we can see. So for example, the Taliban is a gangrenous infection. What is happening in Palestine is what we can see, the civil strife, the war, that's the rotten external gangrene that we can see. And it's not just about excising this visible gangrene, right? It's also about identifying those invisible structures that support the systemic oppression and systemic racism and systemic violation and abuse of human rights around the world. So we shouldn't just focus on giving people physical aid in the form of money, clothes, food, medicines, and so on. Do that too, that's fine. But now it's time to also focus on addressing those invisible structures, whether it's political structures, economic structures, cultural beliefs, or whatever has been crippling these societies from and preventing them from marshalling their sources and fighting back. Or even on a global scale, there's been a lot of talk about how the United Nations has focus. It's become in such a way that the United Nations is just a group of men who are in power around the world, and they are willing to do anything to latch on to that power and to increase their global power. And the United Nations has become less about protecting the rights of the global citizens and more about protecting the rights of those 4 or 5 individuals who just happen to be leaders of some of the most powerful countries, right? And so we need to start addressing those invisible structures that allow these people, allow these men, and in some cases women, to abuse the rights, abuse the powers that they've been given. What is it that we are not able to see right now that we need to topple this sort of whatever horrifying thing that's happening, whatever problems that are existing in these societies, in the global society as a whole, that what can we do to address those invisible structures so that our physical life here in our countries, in our world, in our home become better, become safer, become more loving and protected, and become happier, right? So for me, I know this has been a really long message, but I just really felt like just talking about this. So it's been a lot about not just how to honor the physical body, but also to how to honor the invisible aspects in the world today. And I hope that these humanitarian crises don't become worse, and that we do something to figure out how we can get rid of not just the gangrenous external part of the situation, but even the rotten invisible core that is within, and how we can help our fellow human beings move out of this treacherous and tragic tower moment, and move into the star, the moon, and the sun, and hopefully out into the world, where everything is fulfilled, everything is good, where children can grow up in their home countries and listen to the birds instead of the bombs, right? And how we can do that by honoring the physical aspects of the world and also addressing the invisible barriers that keep people shackled even today. And when we are able to do this, when we are able to honor every single facet, external and internal, then we will be able to achieve true world peace. All right, thank you so much for listening, everyone. And so once again, I really thank you for listening. And just one more thing before we end, a bunch of us are getting together to send out prayers and thanks to the world, or rather, sorry, not thanks, prayers about protection and healing for countries like Afghanistan, specifically Afghanistan, because of what the Taliban is doing right now. And so we are going to be doing a prayer, a group ritual, a group spell, anything basically to send out protection and healing and peaceful energies towards people who are fleeing from Afghanistan, who have fled from Afghanistan and are refugees, and those people who are still stuck in Afghanistan and are at the mercy of the Taliban. So if you would like to join me and the rest of us, so please feel free to reach out to me. Even if you don't want to reach out to me, that's fine. You can do this on your own. All you need to do is just to sit down and just meditate and send positive feelings and protective feelings towards those people. Light a candle, make a wish, or even do a spell or do a ritual of your own choice that can do a healing ritual. It could be a protective ritual, whatever it is, up to you. So feel free to do that, and please do participate if you can, because we need your love, we need your compassion, we need your protection, we need your support, and it is only by working together as a global community that we can help our brothers and sisters out there who are suffering right now. So thank you so much for listening, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.